The iron bars of San Vittore prison were colder than death itself. Bianca pressed her fingers against the metal, feeling the rust bite into her skin. Through the narrow gap she saw her brother. Enzo sat hunched on a wooden bench, his shoulders curved like a broken wing. 3 months ago he had been a craftsman with steady hands and a quick laugh. Now his cheeks were hollow, his eyes empty as abandoned rooms. "Do not come back," he whispered without looking at her. "Forget you have a brother." "I will forget nothing," she answered fiercely. "Tell me who did this. Tell me the truth." He finally raised his head. The movement seemed to cost him everything. "Rossi forged the debt documents. I never borrowed that money, Bianca. They came to my workshop with papers I had never signed. But Rossi is just the hands. Someone else holds the strings. Someone in silk and diamonds." A guard's boots echoed in the corridor. Their time was ending. "Who?" Bianca demanded. "Give me a name." "I cannot." He shook his head slowly. "But follow the silk, sister. Follow it to the top." The guard's shadow fell between them. Bianca stepped back, her hand still reaching through the bars. The smell of mold and despair clung to her clothes as she walked out into the pale morning light. In her pocket she carried a letter of recommendation to the Countess Sforza. The letter was forged. The plan was madness. But madness was all she had left. Her workshop stood empty when she returned. The afternoon sun illuminated dust dancing in the air, falling on bolts of fabric she could no longer afford. Bianca ran her fingers along the edge of her sewing machine, the one her mother had left her. Tomorrow it would belong to a pawnbroker. The door creaked open behind her. "Signorina Morelli." The voice slithered across the room like oil over water. Bianca turned slowly. Signor Rossi stood in her doorway, his cheap cologne failing to mask the sour smell of sweat beneath. His boots gleamed with fresh polish, but his smile belonged to a creature that fed on misery. "Your brother's debt comes due in 3 months," he announced. "After that, they transfer him to the quarries, hard labor. Most men do not survive the first year." "My brother owes nothing. Those documents are lies." Rossi clicked his tongue against his teeth. "Such harsh words. The courts disagree, Signorina. The evidence is quite clear." He withdrew a paper from his coat. "However, I am a reasonable man. Pay 20,000 lira and the matter disappears." 20,000. The sum hung in the air like a death sentence. "I do not have such money." "Then I suggest you find it." He tucked the paper away. "Or find a rich husband quickly. Your hands are pretty enough, though your tongue could use sweetening." He let his gaze travel down her body with deliberate slowness. Bianca felt the violation of it like ice water down her spine. "Get out of my shop." 3 months, Signorina." He smiled, showing yellowed teeth. "The clock is ticking." His footsteps faded down the street. Bianca stood motionless until the sound disappeared entirely. Then she walked to her desk, opened a drawer, and withdrew the forged letter. The paper trembled in her hands. "Follow the silk to the top." The Palazzo Sforza rose against the evening sky like a monument to old money and older secrets. Bianca climbed the marble steps with her heart pounding against her ribs. In her arms, she carried a sample of her work, a collar of Venetian lace so fine it seemed woven from spider silk and moonlight. A butler led her through halls filled with paintings and shadows. The smell of beeswax candles mixed with something darker, something that reminded her of tombs. The Countess's sitting room dripped with blue velvet and gold trim. Two women waited inside. The first sat in a high-backed chair like a queen on her throne. Victorian Sforza. 52 years of age, with silver hair swept up in elaborate curls and eyes the color of frozen lakes. Her reputation preceded her: patron of the arts, pillar of society, destroyer of anyone who crossed her path. The second woman stood by the window, younger, perhaps 24, pretty in a sharp, hungry way. She turned as Bianca entered, and her gaze performed an immediate inventory. The worn hem of Bianca's dress, the calluses on her fingers, the desperation poorly hidden behind her composure. "So this is the seamstress?" The younger woman's voice dripped with honeyed disdain. "How quaint." "My niece, Letizia," the Countess said without warmth. "She assists me in household matters." Letizia's smile did not reach her eyes. Bianca recognized that smile. She had seen it on cats watching wounded birds. "Show me your work," the Countess commanded. Bianca presented the collar. The Countess examined it under the lamplight, her expression revealing nothing. "Adequate, but any trained monkey can follow a pattern." She tossed a piece of fabric at Bianca's feet. "Repair this cuff. You have 10 minutes." Bianca knelt and retrieved the fabric. The damage was deliberate, a test designed for failure. The stitches had been cut in a pattern that would take most seamstresses an hour to repair properly. She was not most seamstresses. Her needle flew. Thread followed thread in a dance her fingers knew better than her own heartbeat. Around her the room fell silent. Even Letizia stopped her smirking. 9 minutes later, Bianca rose and presented the cuff. The repair was invisible, better than invisible. She had improved the original design. The Countess's eyes narrowed with something that might have been respect, or calculation. "You will move into the servants' quarters tomorrow. Your salary is 40 lira per month. Your first task is my gown for the governor's charity ball." "I am honored, Countess." "You should be." As Bianca turned to leave, her eyes caught a stack of papers on the Countess's desk. A familiar seal gleamed in the candlelight. Rossi's seal. Her blood turned to ice, then to fire. Follow the silk to the top. She had found it. The door opened before she could reach it. A man entered, tall and lean, dressed entirely in black. His face was all sharp angles and shadows, his gray eyes cold as winter stone. On his lapel, a silver pin caught the light. The prosecutor's insignia. "Ah," the Countess called out. "Perfect timing. Bianca, allow me to introduce my nephew, Countess Sforza. He handles legal matters for our family." Their eyes met. Something passed between them, a current of recognition that neither could name. "Marco, dear, this is our new seamstress. Her brother is that unfortunate debtor you mentioned, the one facing the quarries." Marco's expression did not change, but his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Signorina Morelli." His voice was low, controlled. "I know your brother's case well. The evidence against him is quite thorough." Bianca forced herself to breathe. "Evidence," she replied carefully, "can be manufactured." A dangerous accusation. The truth often is. The silence stretched between them like a blade. The Countess watched with amusement dancing in her frozen eyes.
Letizia looked from one to the other, her expression sharpening with sudden interest. "How delightful," the Countess murmured. "This arrangement promises to be most entertaining." Bianca walked out into the night. Behind her, the palazzo loomed like a beautiful trap. Inside its walls, her enemy waited. Inside its walls, her brother's executioner lived. And inside its walls, she would find the proof to destroy them all. The servants' quarters smelled of damp wool and forgotten hopes. Bianca unpacked her meager belongings into a narrow dresser that had seen better decades. Her room had once been a storage closet, evident from the hooks still embedded in the walls. A single window, barely wider than her hand, offered a view of the kitchen courtyard below. She had slept in worse places, but she had never slept surrounded by enemies. A knock rattled her door. Before she could answer, it swung open. Letizia stood in the hallway, dressed in morning silk the color of fresh cream. Behind her, a maid carried a silver tray with coffee and pastries. "I thought you might need refreshment," Letizia said sweetly. "Your journey here must have been exhausting." "You are too kind, signorina." Letizia glided into the room, her skirts brushing against the cramped walls. She examined Bianca's sketches spread across the tiny desk, her fingers trailing over the paper with deliberate carelessness. "These are your designs for my aunt's gown?" Her eyebrow arched. "How ambitious!" The maid set down the tray. Coffee sloshed over the rim of the cup, spreading across Bianca's drawings like a dark stain. The girl gasped and retreated. Letizia's expression remained perfectly innocent. "Oh dear, how clumsy of her," she sighed dramatically. "I suppose you will need to start again. What a pity." Bianca looked at her ruined work. Hours of planning destroyed in seconds. The coffee smell mixed with the bitter tang of burnt paper where the hot liquid had touched her ink. "These things happen," Bianca replied evenly. "I have learned that obstacles only matter if you allow them to stop you." "What a charming philosophy." Letizia's smile sharpened. "Tell me, where did you train? Your accent suggests the lower quarters of the city." "My mother taught me. She served the Duchess of Parma for 15 years. "A servant teaching a servant." Letizia examined her nails with exaggerated boredom. "How perfectly circular. I suppose talent is sometimes found in unexpected gutters." The insult landed like a slap. Bianca felt heat rise to her cheeks, but she kept her voice steady. "I have noticed that truly elegant ladies rarely discuss gutters, signorina. Perhaps their minds dwell on higher things." Letizia's composure cracked for just a moment. Her eyes flashed with something dangerous before the mask slipped back into place. "Enjoy your coffee, seamstress." She turned toward the door. "And do remember your place in this house. Needles can slip. Accidents happen to those who forget where they belong." The door clicked shut behind her. Bianca stood motionless, listening to the retreating footsteps. Then she gathered her stained sketches and began again. The library called to her like a siren. Bianca had noticed it during her tour of the palazzo the previous evening. A vast room filled with leather-bound volumes and mahogany furniture. More importantly, it connected directly to the Countess's private study, and the Countess kept her papers there. She needed a reason to enter. The opportunity came at midday when she noticed a torn curtain in the hallway outside. "I could repair that," she offered to the head housekeeper. "It would only take a moment." The woman shrugged and handed her the key. Bianca slipped inside with her sewing basket, her heart hammering against her ribs. The library smelled of old books and candle smoke. Dust motes danced in shafts of autumn light that fell through tall windows. She moved toward the connecting door to the study. Locked, of course. But perhaps she could see something through the keyhole, or find papers left carelessly on a desk. Fascinating technique. The voice froze her mid-step. Marco Sforza emerged from behind a reading chair, a book still open in his hands. He wore a dark gray coat today, and his silver watch chain caught the light as he moved. "Signor Sforza." Bianca struggled to calm her breathing. "I did not see you there." Evidently. He set down his book. "The curtain is in the hallway, Signorina. This is the library. An easy mistake, I suppose, for someone unfamiliar with the difference between windows and books." "I was admiring the collection. My late father loved literature." "Did he?" Marco moved closer. His eyes traveled over the spines on the nearest shelf. "And which authors did he prefer? Perhaps we share similar tastes." A trap. She could feel it closing around her. "He favored poetry, Dante primarily." "Ah." Marco pulled a volume from the shelf. "Then you will appreciate this. A first edition of the Inferno." He opened it to a marked page. "Tell me your favorite passage." Bianca's mouth went dry. She had read Dante, yes, but years ago. The words swam in her memory like fish beneath murky water. "The deepest circle of hell," she said slowly, "is reserved for those who betray trust. I have always found that particularly meaningful." Marco's expression flickered. Something passed behind his eyes, too quick to identify. "An interesting choice." He closed the book. "Tell me, Signorina, do you believe all betrayers deserve such punishment? Even those who betray for righteous reasons?" "I believe the road to hell needs no good intentions. Justice does." "Justice." He almost smiled. "A seamstress who philosophizes. You are full of surprises." He reached into his coat and withdrew a leather folder. Bianca recognized the official seal immediately. Her brother's case file. "I reviewed your brother's documents again last night." Marco spread several papers across the reading table. "The evidence is overwhelming. Signed contracts, witness statements, bank records." "Forged," Bianca whispered. "All of it." "Perhaps." His gray eyes met hers. "But perhaps is not proof. I cannot overturn a conviction based on a sister's loyalty." "Then look harder." "I have looked." He gathered the papers slowly. "The witness who signed these statements is Signor Rossi, a respected businessman with connections throughout Milan." "Rossi is a snake." "Snakes can still tell the truth." "And Rossi's truth sends your brother to the quarries in 3 months. Bianca gripped the edge of the table until her knuckles whitened. Marco watched her with an expression she could not read. Then he did something unexpected. He left the folder on the table and walked toward the door. "I have business in the city," he said without turning. "I will return in 2 hours. The library will remain unlocked until then." He paused at the threshold. "I trust you will find whatever you are truly looking for." The door closed behind him. Bianca stared at the folder.
Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside, she found everything. Every piece of manufactured evidence, every false signature. And at the bottom, a list of other names, other victims of the same scheme. A sound from the hallway made her look up. Footsteps approached. The fitting room blazed with afternoon light. The Countess stood before a full-length mirror, examining herself from every angle. Bianca knelt at her feet, pinning the hem of an elaborate burgundy gown. "The governor's wife will be wearing blue," the Countess mused. "How predictable. I need something that commands the room." "This silk came from Venice," Bianca murmured around the pins in her mouth. "The dye contains crushed rubies." "Rubies in fabric. How delightfully decadent." Letizia entered without knocking, carrying a stack of correspondence. "The seating arrangements for the ball, Aunt." She glanced at Bianca with barely concealed contempt. "Also, I have wonderful news about Marco." The Countess's attention sharpened. "Oh?" "He has agreed to announce his engagement at the ball." Letizia's smile stretched across her face like a blade. "To me, of course. It was always understood between our families."
Bianca's hand slipped. A pin drove into her thumb, sending a drop of blood onto the carpet. She pressed her lips together to keep from crying out. "How wonderful," the Countess said flatly. "Marco finally sees reason. The Sforza fortune needs a proper heir, and you have been waiting so patiently." "Indeed I have." Letizia watched Bianca with glittering eyes. "Some of us understand that certain prizes require years of careful cultivation, unlike those who think they can simply snatch what they want." The pin box slipped from Bianca's grip. 100 tiny needles scattered across the parquet floor like silver rain, catching the light as they fell. "Clumsy girl," the Countess observed coldly. "Do be more careful. Sharp things can be dangerous. They have a tendency to draw blood when least expected." Bianca gathered the fallen pins one by one, her fingers trembling against the polished wood. Behind her, she could feel Letizia's triumphant gaze burning into her back like a brand. That night, the corridor outside the library stretched empty and dark. Bianca crept along the wall, her stockinged feet silent on the marble. The door was locked now. Of course, Marco had secured it after leaving. She withdrew a hairpin from her sleeve. The lock was old, ornate, designed for beauty rather than security. Within minutes, she felt the mechanism give way. The door swung open. Moonlight poured through the tall windows, illuminating the shelves like silver fire. "Looking for something specific?" Marco's voice came from directly behind her. "Or perhaps you simply enjoy reading by moonlight?" Bianca's heart stopped. She turned slowly. He stood in the shadows of the hallway, still dressed in his evening clothes, his gray eyes unreadable in the darkness. "We both hunt ghosts in this house, Signorina." His voice dropped lower. "We simply hunt different ones." Moonlight turned Marco's face into a sculpture of silver and shadow. Bianca pressed her back against the library door, feeling the carved wood bite into her spine. Her hairpin still dangled from the lock like evidence of her crime. There was no explanation that would save her now. "I heard noises," she tried. "I thought perhaps an intruder." "An intruder?" Marco stepped closer. "And you decided to investigate alone, armed with nothing but a hairpin and exceptional lock-picking skills. How remarkably brave." The scent of sandalwood and something bitter reached her, his cologne mixed with tobacco smoke. He had been awake then.
waiting. "You expected me to come back?" Bianca whispered. "I suspected."
He reached past her and pushed the library door fully open. "The question is whether you found what you sought this afternoon, and whether you plan to use it against my family."
"Your family destroyed mine first." The words escaped before she could stop them.
Marco's expression shifted, a crack appearing in his marble composure. "Tell me," he said quietly. "Tell me everything." Something in his voice made her hesitate, not the command of a prosecutor, but the plea of a man carrying his own hidden burden. Bianca studied his face in the moonlight, searching for the trap.
"Why should I trust you?"
"Because we hunt the same ghost." He withdrew a key from his pocket and gestured toward the dark library. "Come, there are things I need to show you." The library swallowed them in shadows and the smell of ancient leather. Marco lit a single candle, its flame casting dancing patterns across the towering shelves. He moved with the certainty of someone who had walked this path many times before. "My father died in this house," he said without preamble, 10 years ago. They called it suicide. A man ruined by gambling debts, unable to face his shame. Bianca remained silent, watching. "I was 24 when they found him." Marco's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "He left no note, only a half-finished letter hidden in his desk. I discovered it months later."
"What did it say?"
"That someone in this family had orchestrated his destruction. That the gambling debts were fabricated, the witnesses paid." He stopped before a tall window, his silhouette black against the pearlescent glass. "He died before he could name them." The cold marble floor numbed Bianca's feet through her thin stockings. She thought of Enzo in his cell, wasting away for crimes he never committed. The pattern repeated itself, generation after generation. "You believe your aunt killed him?"
"I have believed it for 10 years.
Marco turned to face her.
"But belief is not proof, and without proof I am nothing but a grieving son with wild accusations." "The papers I found today, the list of victims. You saw them then?"
He nodded slowly.
"Rossi has been destroying families for at least 15 years. Always the same method. Forged debts, false witnesses, seizure of property. Your brother is merely the latest. And the Countess? Rossi is her creature. He does nothing without her approval." Marco's jaw tightened. "But she leaves no traces. Every document bears his signature, not hers. Every witness knows only his name. She remains untouched, wrapped in silk and respectability."
Bianca moved toward the desk where she had found the folder earlier. The papers were gone now, the surface polished and empty.
"There was a list," she said urgently. "Names and dates. If I could copy it, take it to the authorities."
"I copied it years ago." Marco opened a hidden drawer she had not noticed. Inside lay a leather satchel. "It changes nothing. Rossi claims these are legitimate debts, legitimately collected. Without my aunt's direct involvement, the courts side with money."
"Then we must find her direct involvement."
"We?" His eyebrow arched. "You left that door unlocked on purpose." Bianca held his gaze.
"You wanted me to find those documents. You have been waiting for an ally, Signor. Someone with nothing left to lose."
The candle flame wavered between them,
Marco's expression shifted through shadows of doubt and something that might have been hope. "You are either very clever," he said at last, "or very dangerous." "Perhaps both." A sound echoed from somewhere deep in the house. Footsteps descending a staircase. Marco extinguished the candle with a quick motion. "The servants wake at 5, he breathed. "You must go." Bianca gathered her skirts and moved toward the door. Marco caught her wrist as she passed. "Tomorrow night, the Countess dines with the governor until late. Her study will be empty." "The door is locked." "I know." His fingers pressed something cold and metallic into her palm. "I have had this key for 20 years. I never had the courage to use it alone." Bianca clutched the key against her chest and slipped into the dark corridor. The servants' staircase groaned beneath her feet, despite her careful steps. She had nearly reached her floor when a figure emerged from the shadows ahead. Letizia stood on the landing, wrapped in a silk robe the color of blood. Her hair hung loose around her shoulders, and her eyes glittered with malicious triumph. "Working late, seamstress?" Her gaze dropped to Bianca's ink-stained fingers. "Strange. I see no fabric." "No thread, only the marks of someone who has been handling documents." "I was preparing sketches for the Countess." "At 3 in the morning, in the library." Letizia smiled slowly. "How industrious." The key burned against Bianca's palm. If Letizia searched her now, everything would be lost. "Some of us must work for our position," Bianca replied carefully. "We cannot all rely on advantageous marriages." The smile vanished from Letizia's face. "You think yourself clever." She stepped closer, close enough that Bianca could smell her perfume, roses and something sickly sweet beneath. "You think that your pretty hands and your pretty face will earn you something in this house. But I have watched Marco. I have seen how he looks at you." "I do not know what you mean." "Do not insult my intelligence." Letizia's voice dropped to a venomous whisper. "He is mine. This house will be mine. And you are nothing but a servant playing above her station." "Then you have nothing to fear from me." "I fear nothing. But I am also not stupid." Letizia withdrew a folded paper from her robe. "I found this in your room this evening, while you were working so diligently in the library." Bianca's blood turned to ice. The paper. The list she had copied from the folder hidden beneath her mattress. "The Countess would find this very interesting," Letizia continued. "A seamstress stealing private documents, copying secret records." She pressed the paper against her chest. "I could destroy you with a single word." "What do you want?" "I have not decided yet." Letizia backed toward her chamber door. "Perhaps your silence, perhaps your disappearance, perhaps something else entirely." She paused at the threshold. "But I am patient, seamstress. I can wait."
And while I wait, you will wonder every moment when the blade will fall. The door closed with a soft click. Bianca climbed the final stairs to her room on trembling legs. Inside, her belongings lay scattered across the floor, every drawer emptied, every pocket turned inside out. On her pillow rested a single red rose, Letizia's signature. Beside it, a note written in elegant script.
One word to the Countess would be enough. But I am patient. For now. Bianca sank onto her narrow bed, the stolen key still clutched in her palm. Outside her window, the first gray light of dawn crept across Milan's rooftops. Somewhere in this house, her enemies multiplied. The Countess with her schemes, Rossi with his forged documents, Letizia with her jealousy and her stolen evidence. And Marco Sforza, the prosecutor who hunted his own family. Ally or enemy? She could not be certain. But she was certain of one thing. Tomorrow night, she would open that study door. And whatever she found inside would either save her brother or destroy them both. The courtroom smelled of dust and broken dreams. Bianca slipped into the public gallery just as the morning session began. She had wrapped her hair beneath a dark shawl and borrowed a servant's plain dress, hoping to disappear among the other spectators. Below her, rows of wooden benches faced the judge's elevated platform like pews before an altar of cold justice. Marco entered through a side door. In his black robes, he seemed taller, more imposing. His face wore the mask of professional detachment as he arranged papers at the prosecutor's table. He did not look up at the gallery. He did not need to. Bianca felt certain he knew she was there. The judge called the case. Enzo Morelli, debtor, accused of fraudulent bankruptcy and failure to honor legal obligations. Her brother shuffled in, flanked by guards. The chains on his wrists clinked with each step, a rhythm of despair. He had lost more weight since her last visit. His prison uniform hung on his frame like a shroud waiting for its corpse. Marco rose to present the evidence. His voice filled the chamber, clear and merciless. The defendant signed 3 promissory notes totaling 18,000 lire. He pointed to documents spread before the judge. Each note bears his signature, witnessed by Signor Rossi, a respected merchant of this city. The defendant failed to repay these debts, then attempted to hide his assets through fraudulent transfer to his sister. Bianca's nails dug into her palms. Every word was a lie wrapped in legal language. The witness statements confirm the defendant's full awareness of his obligations. Marco lifted another paper. I call the court's attention to the testimony of Signor Giacomo Rossi. At the mention of that name, Marco paused. It was brief, barely a heartbeat, but Bianca caught it. A tightening around his eyes, a slight hesitation before continuing. He did not believe his own case. The session ended at noon. The judge scheduled final arguments for the following week. Enzo was led away without once looking at the gallery. Perhaps he had not seen her. Perhaps he no longer cared. Bianca waited until the courtroom emptied before descending the stairs. Outside, autumn wind scattered golden leaves across the courthouse steps. She stood in the shadow of a marble column, uncertain where to go, what to do next. You should not have come. Marco appeared beside her, still wearing his robes. His face remained composed, but his voice carried an edge she had not heard before. I needed to see, she replied. I needed to understand what we are fighting. What you saw was theater. He guided her away from the building, toward a small public garden across the street. The verdict was decided before the first word was spoken. Rossi's testimony is unimpeachable because no one dares impeach him. The garden offered a bench beneath a canopy of dying leaves. The air smelled of wood smoke and approaching winter. Bianca sat heavily, her strength suddenly abandoning her. Then there is no hope. I did not say that. Marco remained standing, his eyes scanning the street for observers. I said the legal path is blocked. We need evidence that bypasses the courts entirely. What evidence could do that? Direct proof of my aunt's involvement. Her signature on Rossi's documents, her handwritten instructions, something that makes her crimes undeniable. Bianca thought of the key hidden in her room. Tonight, the Countess dined with the governor until late. Her study would be empty. And if we find such proof, then I take it to the governor myself. Marco finally sat beside her, leaving a careful distance between them. He is an honest man. He owes my aunt nothing and fears her less. If we present evidence of systematic fraud, he will act. You would destroy your own family. My family died 10 years ago. His voice hardened. What remains is a name attached to a monster. I owe it nothing. A group of children ran past, chasing a ball across the brown grass. Their laughter seemed to belong to another world, one where families stayed whole and justice existed. Why are you helping me? Bianca asked quietly. You could expose me to your aunt at any moment. Claim ignorance. Protect your position. Why risk everything for a seamstress? Marco was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice had dropped to almost a whisper. Because you remind me of someone. Who? Myself, 10 years ago, standing in this same garden, watching the courthouse where they declared my father's death a suicide, knowing the truth and unable to prove it. He turned to face her. I was too young then, too afraid. I let the moment pass, and I have regretted it every day since. His hand moved toward hers, stopped, then completed the motion. His fingers were cold against her skin, cold but steady. I will not let another family be destroyed by her greed. Bianca looked at their joined hands. The touch sent warmth spreading through her chest, a dangerous warmth she could not afford. The engagement, she heard herself say. Letizia announced that you would marry her at the ball. Marco's grip tightened briefly. My aunt's arrangement, not mine. She has been maneuvering for years to keep me controlled through marriage. Letizia is her creature, body and soul. Then you will refuse? After tonight, there may be nothing left to refuse. He released her hand and stood. The Countess dines with the governor until 10. Her study will be accessible for 4 hours at least. I cannot enter without suspicion, but you can. What am I looking for? A safe behind the portrait of her late husband. I discovered it as a child, but never found the key. He hesitated. Whatever proof exists, it will be there. Her most private documents, her most damning secrets. And the key to the safe? Marco reached into his coat and withdrew a small brass key, different from the one he had given her before. I stole it from her jewelry box 20 years ago. She never noticed it missing. Perhaps she forgot it existed. He pressed it into her palm. Tonight, we end this. The fitting room blazed with afternoon light when Bianca returned to the palazzo. She had barely crossed the threshold when the Countess summoned her. The hem requires adjustment, the Countess announced, gesturing to the burgundy gown spread across a mannequin. I want it shorter, more modern. Of course, Countess. Bianca knelt and began working, her mind racing ahead to tonight.
The key seemed to burn against her thigh, hidden in a secret pocket she had sewn into her dress that morning. Letizia swept into the room, her face flushed with some private excitement.
"Aunt, I have the most wonderful news. The engagement announcement is confirmed for the ball. The governor himself will witness it."
Excellent. The Countess examined her reflection with cold satisfaction. Marco has been difficult lately, but he will comply. He understands the importance of family duty. Some people understand duty. Leticia's eyes slid toward Bianca. Others think they can escape their station through cleverness. It never works, of course. The natural order always reasserts itself. Bianca's needle continued its steady rhythm. She did not look up. "Speaking of duty," the Countess's voice sharpened, "Rossi requires another signature, some tedious debtor in the textile district. I need the matter resolved before the ball." "I will handle it personally." The words slipped from the Countess's mouth carelessly, like crumbs from a rich table. But Bianca heard them clearly. Resolve the matter. Another family destroyed with a stroke of the pen. Her hand trembled. A needle drove deep into her fingertip. Blood welled up, bright red against the pale skin. "Careful, child." The Countess watched with amusement. "You seem distracted today. I do hope nothing is troubling you." "Nothing, Countess. Merely tired from late work." "Then rest well tonight. I dine with the governor and will return late." "Letizia will supervise the household in my absence." The Countess departed in a rustle of silk and authority. Letizia lingered, her smile sharp as broken glass. "Yes, seamstress. Rest well." She leaned closer. "You will need your strength for what comes next." The grandfather clock in the main hall struck 9. Bianca pressed her back against the cold wall of the servants' corridor, counting footsteps above her head. The Countess had departed an hour ago, her carriage wheels crunching on gravel as she rode toward the governor's residence. Letizia had retired to her chambers at 8, claiming a headache. The household had settled into the quiet rhythm of an evening without its mistress. The key to the study felt warm now, heated by Bianca's nervous grip. She had memorized the route through the palazzo's shadow passages, the narrow corridors used by servants to move unseen between rooms. Marco had drawn her a map that afternoon, pressed into her hand during a chance encounter in the garden. She moved silently through darkness that smelled of old stone and candle wax. Her stockinged feet made no sound on the marble. At each corner she paused and listened. The house breathed around her, creaking and settling like a sleeping beast. The Countess's study occupied a corner of the second floor, accessible through both the main corridor and a hidden door behind a tapestry. Bianca chose the hidden path. The tapestry depicted a hunting scene, hounds tearing at a wounded stag. She slipped behind it and found the narrow passage Marco had described. The door yielded to the first key. Inside, moonlight poured through tall windows, illuminating a room that reeked of power and secrets. Mahogany furniture gleamed with dark polish. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with volumes that had never been read, purchased for appearance rather than knowledge. And there, above the fireplace, hung the portrait of the late Count Sforza, Marco's father, the man destroyed by his own wife. Bianca approached the painting slowly. The Count had been handsome once, with Marco's gray eyes and strong jaw. But the artist had captured something haunted in his expression, a knowledge of approaching doom that made the portrait feel like a warning from beyond the grave. She reached up and felt along the ornate frame. Her fingers found a catch hidden beneath carved acanthus leaves. The portrait swung forward on invisible hinges, revealing a steel safe embedded in the wall. The second key fit perfectly. Inside, she found exactly what Marco had predicted: stacks of documents bound with red ribbon, letters in the Countess's distinctive handwriting, account ledgers filled with columns of numbers that told a story of systematic theft spanning decades. Bianca pulled out the nearest stack and began reading. Her hands trembled as the scope of the conspiracy became clear. Rossi was merely the instrument. Every forged document, every false witness, every destroyed family traced back to instructions written in elegant, feminine script. The Countess had built an empire on the ruins of innocent lives. She selected her victims carefully, targeting craftsmen and small merchants whose businesses could be absorbed into her network after their owners fell into manufactured debt. And there, near the bottom of the stack, Bianca found her brother's name: Enzo Morelli, leather workshop, Via Torino. Property value estimated at 12,000 lire. Target date for debt initiation, March 1889. The date was 3 months before Rossi first appeared at her brother's door. They had planned his destruction before he even knew they existed. Bianca stuffed documents into the cloth bag she had brought, selecting the most damning evidence. Her hands worked automatically while her mind burned with rage and desperate hope. This was enough. This would be enough to bring the Countess down, to free Enzo, to end the nightmare that had consumed her life. She was reaching for the final stack when she heard it. Footsteps in the corridor outside. Not the soft shuffle of servants, but the deliberate click of heeled boots on marble. Coming closer, stopping directly outside the study door. Bianca froze. The bag hung heavy in her grip. There was no time to return the documents to the safe, no time to close the portrait, no time to do anything but stand paralyzed in the moonlight. A key turned in the lock. The door swung open. Letizia stood in the threshold, a candelabra raised in one hand and a pistol in the other. The flames cast dancing shadows across her triumphant smile. "I knew you would come tonight." She stepped into the room, her silk dressing gown rustling like scales. "I have been watching you for days, seamstress. Every furtive glance, every whispered conversation with my dear cousin. Did you think I was blind?" "Letizia." Bianca backed toward the window.
This is not what it appears.
"No?" Letizia's laugh echoed off the high ceiling. "Then perhaps you can explain why you stand before my aunt's private safe with a bag full of stolen documents. Take your time. I find creative lies amusing." There was no creative lie that could save her now. Bianca's mind raced through possibilities and found none.
"Your aunt has destroyed dozens of innocent families," she said instead. "My brother rots in prison for crimes he did not commit. These papers prove everything."
"I know exactly what these papers prove." Letizia set the candelabra on the desk, keeping the pistol leveled at Bianca's chest. "I have known my aunt's business for years. Who do you think helps you select the victims?" The words struck like physical blows. Bianca stared at the woman before her, seeing past the pretty face to the corruption beneath.
"You are part of it."
I am essential to it. Letizia moved closer, her smile widening. Someone must identify the targets. Someone must charm the wives while their husbands sign their futures away. Someone must play the innocent niece while fortunes change hands. She gestured with the pistol. I have earned my place in this family, unlike you, who thought to steal it through a handsome face and a sad story. Marco will expose you. He knows everything. Marco. Letizia's voice dripped with contempt. My dear, devoted cousin. He has suspected for years and done nothing. Do you know why? Because he is weak. Because he clings to evidence and procedure while the world burns around him.
He could have destroyed us 100 times, but he waits for proof that will never satisfy him. She raised the pistol higher, aiming directly at Bianca's heart. And now, he has sent you to do his work. A seamstress playing spy. How touching. How utterly predictable. You cannot shoot me. The servants would hear. The servants have been given the night off. A special treat from the generous Signorina Letizia. She cocked the hammer with a soft click. We are quite alone. Bianca's back pressed against the cold window pane. Below her, the garden lay in darkness. Too far to jump, too far to escape. What will you tell them? She forced her voice to remain steady. How will you explain my death? A tragic accident. The new seamstress, unstable from grief over her criminal brother, broke into the study, intending to steal valuables. When confronted, she leaped from the window rather than face justice. Letizia shrugged elegantly. My aunt will be devastated, of course. She so wanted to help the poor girl. The window behind Bianca creaked. She pressed harder against it, feeling the metal frame dig into her shoulders. And Marco? You would kill someone he cared about? Something flickered in Letizia's eyes, jealousy, raw and burning. He does not care about you. He cares about his crusade, his justice, his precious truth. You are merely a tool. She steadied her aim. But yes, watching him mourn will be satisfying. Perhaps in his grief he will finally accept me. Perhaps he will finally see that I am the only one who truly understands him. The madness in her voice was absolute. Bianca realized she was facing not just greed, but obsession, the twisted love of someone who would destroy the object of her desire rather than lose him. He will never love you. Letizia's finger tightened on the trigger. A shadow moved in the doorway behind her. Drop the weapon, Marco's voice commanded. Now! Letizia spun, firing wildly. The shot shattered a vase near the door, sending ceramic shards exploding through the air. Marco dove sideways, rolling behind the desk. Letizia screamed with rage and turned the pistol back toward Bianca. Then you both die! Bianca grabbed the candelabra from the desk and swung it with all her strength. The heavy brass connected with Letizia's wrist. The pistol clattered across the floor. Letizia staggered backward, clutching her arm and howling. Marco rose from behind the desk. His face was pale, blood trickling from a cut on his cheek where a shard had struck him. But his eyes blazed with the cold fire of finally seeing truth confirmed. It is over, Letizia. She laughed through her tears of pain. Nothing is over, cousin. My aunt will return within the hour. Do you think she dines with the governor until 10? She left early to attend to business.
She will find you here with your seamstress and your stolen evidence. And then we will see who stands trial. The grandfather clock in the hall below struck 9:30. They had 30 minutes. Leticia's laughter filled the study like poison. Marco moved swiftly, pulling a silk cord from the curtains and binding her wrists behind her back. She struggled, spitting curses that would have shocked the most hardened dock worker. Her carefully maintained facade of aristocratic elegance shattered completely, revealing the feral creature beneath.
"You will regret this, cousin."
She twisted in his grip.
"My aunt will destroy you. She will take everything you have ever loved."
She already did that 10 years ago. Marco tightened the final knot. "Bianca, the documents. We must leave, now." Bianca gathered the remaining papers from the safe, her hands shaking but determined. The bag bulged with evidence, enough to condemn the Countess 100 times over. She closed the safe and pushed the portrait back into place, though there was little point in concealing their intrusion now. "Where do we go?" She slung the bag over her shoulder. "The governor?" "His residence is across the city. 20 minutes by carriage if we are lucky." Marco calculated quickly. "My aunt could return at any moment. We need to move." "And her?" Bianca looked at Letizia, who had fallen silent, her eyes calculating even in captivity. "We take her with us. She is evidence too." They half-dragged, half-carried Letizia through the servants' corridor. She made their progress difficult, stumbling deliberately, crying out at random intervals, hoping to alert someone. But the house remained eerily quiet. Letizia had done her work too well, dismissing the staff for the evening. The kitchen door led to the rear courtyard where the lesser carriages were kept. Marco selected a light, two-horse vehicle, quick and maneuverable through Milan's narrow streets. He lifted Letizia roughly into the back seat, while Bianca climbed beside him on the driver's bench. "Can you handle horses?" He untied the reins.
"My brother taught me years ago."
"Good. Drive. I will watch her." The carriage lurched forward into the night. The cobblestones beneath the wheels created a thunderous rhythm that seemed to announce their flight to all of Milan. Bianca guided the horses through back streets she remembered from childhood, avoiding the main boulevards where they might encounter the Countess's returning carriage. Behind her, she heard Letizia resume her whispered threats.
"Do you know what my aunt does to those who betray her?"
Her voice was silk wrapped around a blade.
"She does not kill them. That would be too merciful. She destroys everything they love first. Their families, their fortunes, their reputations. Only then, when they have nothing left, does she let them die."
"Be silent." Marco's voice was flat. "Your father begged at the end, cousin. Did you know that?" Letizia's cruelty found new reserves.
"He came to her on his knees, pleading for mercy.
She made him watch as she burned every document that could have saved him. Then she gave him the razor blade herself." The carriage swerved as Bianca's hands jerked on the reins. Marco's face had gone white in the darkness.
"She is lying,"
Bianca said quickly.
"She is trying to hurt you."
"Am I lying, cousin?" Letizia pressed on. "Ask yourself how I know about the razor. The official report said pills. Only someone present would know the truth."
"I was 12 years old when my father died. I found his body. I saw the blade."
Marco's voice emerged strangled, broken.
"But my aunt claimed she was in Venice that week. She lied, as she lies about everything."
Letizia laughed softly. I was there too, hiding in the closet. She made me watch so I would understand the price of betrayal. That was my education, cousin. That was how she taught me loyalty. The revelation hung in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre. Bianca felt the shape of the horror surrounding her, the depths of corruption that ran through this family like rot through ancient wood. "How could you stay?" she could not help asking. "After seeing that, how could you remain with her?" "Because I am practical."
Leticia's voice regained its cold composure. Power is power. Better to stand beside the monster than beneath its feet. You would understand if you were not so foolishly sentimental. The governor's residence rose before them, a palatial building ablaze with lights. Guards flanked the main entrance, their uniforms crisp in the torchlight. Bianca pulled the carriage to a halt. "Wait here." Marco jumped down and approached the guards. "Tell the governor that Prosecutor Marco Sforza requires an immediate audience. The matter concerns treason and murder at the highest levels of Milan society." The guard examined him skeptically. Marco's clothes were disheveled, his cheek still bleeding, his appearance anything but dignified. But the name Sforza carried weight. The guard disappeared inside. Minutes crawled past like hours. Bianca watched the street behind them, expecting at any moment to see the Countess's black carriage emerge from the shadows. Letizia sat quietly now, her expression unreadable. "She is already here," Letizia said suddenly. "Look at the courtyard. Third carriage from the left." Bianca's blood froze. A familiar vehicle stood among the others, its gilded crest gleaming in the torchlight. The Countess had arrived before them. "Marco!" She grabbed his arm as he returned. "Your aunt is inside." He followed her gaze, and understanding dawned in his eyes. The dinner. She was dining with the governor himself. She never left early at all. Then Letizia lied about her returning home. "Of course I lied." Letizia smiled serenely from the carriage. "I needed you to panic, to flee, to arrive here looking like criminals rather than accusers. My aunt anticipated this possibility weeks ago. Every step you have taken, she has foreseen." The doors of the residence opened. The Countess emerged, resplendent in midnight blue silk, the governor himself at her elbow. Behind them came a squadron of household guards. "There they are," the Countess called out, her voice carrying across the courtyard. "Just as I warned you, Excellency. My nephew and his accomplice." Fleeing with stolen property. The governor was a portly man, with a face that spoke of too many rich dinners and too few difficult decisions. He examined Marco and Bianca with the expression of someone deeply inconvenienced. "Prosecutor Sforza, I confess myself surprised. Your aunt tells me you have been behaving erratically." "My aunt is a murderer and a thief." Marco stepped forward. "I have evidence that proves it. Decades of fraud, dozens of ruined families, including my own father." "Your father died by his own hand." The Countess's voice dripped with concern. "This delusion has plagued my poor nephew for years. I blame myself for not intervening sooner." "She has documents in that bag," the governor pointed at Bianca. "Stolen from my home, according to the Countess. What exactly do you expect me to believe?" Bianca gripped the bag tightly. Everything depended on the next few moments. If the governor sided with the Countess, they were lost. The evidence would be confiscated, destroyed.
She and Marco would face charges of theft and conspiracy. "Examine the documents yourself," she heard herself say. "Let them speak their own truth." The governor hesitated. For a moment, Bianca saw doubt flicker in his eyes. Then the Countess laid her hand on his arm, a gesture of perfect intimacy. "My dear governor, surely you do not intend to read stolen papers in the middle of the night based on the claims of a seamstress?" She laughed delicately. "Let your guards take them into custody. The courts can sort this out properly." "The courts are corrupted." Marco's voice rang across the courtyard. "Rossi has paid off half the judges in Milan. You know this, Excellency. Everyone knows this. But those documents prove who truly controls the corruption." The guards advanced. Bianca backed against the carriage, clutching the bag like a lifeline. Marco positioned himself between her and the approaching men, his hands raised in desperate appeal. "One chance, Excellency. One chance to examine the truth before it disappears forever." The governor looked from Marco to the Countess. His face showed the calculation of a lifetime politician, weighing outcomes and alliances. "Arrest them both," he said finally. "We will examine the evidence tomorrow, in proper circumstances." The guards seized Marco's arms. Others reached for Bianca. She felt rough hands grab her shoulders, pulling her away from the carriage. "No!" she struggled uselessly. "The evidence will be destroyed by morning." "Enough!" The governor turned back toward his residence. "I grow tired of this spectacle." A new voice cut through the night. "Perhaps the governor should examine the evidence now. After all, I brought witnesses." Everyone turned. A tall man in judge's robes stood at the courtyard entrance, flanked by a dozen officials Bianca did not recognize. Behind them, she caught a glimpse of Enzo, her brother, still in prison clothes but standing free. "Judge Alberti!" The Countess's composure cracked for the first time. "What is the meaning of this intrusion?" "The meaning, Countess, is justice." The judge advanced into the torchlight. "Real justice, not the kind you purchase by the pound." Judge Alberti moved through the courtyard like a ship cutting through troubled waters. The officials behind him spread out in practiced formation, blocking the exits with quiet efficiency. Bianca recognized some of their uniforms. Investigators from the Ministry of Justice, men who answered to Rome rather than Milan's corrupted local courts. "This is outrageous!" The Countess recovered her composure with frightening speed. "Governor, I must protest this unauthorized intrusion." "The authorization comes from the minister himself." Judge Alberti produced a sealed document and handed it to the governor. 3 weeks ago, Prosecutor Sforza sent a detailed report to Rome. He outlined suspicions of systematic fraud reaching the highest levels of Milanese society. The minister dispatched me to investigate discreetly. Marco's face registered shock. Bianca understood instantly. He had not known the investigation was coming. He had sent his report expecting nothing, hoping for everything. "You received my letter," Marco breathed. "Every word." The judge turned toward him with something approaching warmth. "You were thorough, prosecutor. Perhaps too thorough. You named everyone involved, including your own family. That level of honesty is rare in our profession." The governor studied the minister's seal, his expression shifting from annoyance to careful neutrality.
Political winds were changing before his eyes, and he was recalculating his position with visible effort. Judge Alberti, I naturally cooperate with any legitimate federal investigation. He stepped away from the Countess, as if she had suddenly developed plague. Perhaps we should move this discussion inside. An excellent suggestion. The judge gestured to his men. Bring everyone, including the Countess and her niece. They assembled in the governor's grand reception hall, a room designed for state dinners and diplomatic functions. Tonight it would serve as an impromptu tribunal. Servants hastily lit additional candelabras, while officials arranged chairs in a rough semicircle. Bianca found herself seated beside her brother. Enzo gripped her hand with desperate strength, his eyes hollow but alive with desperate hope.
They came to the prison 3 hours ago, he whispered. Told me I was needed as a witness. I thought it was another trick.
It is real, she squeezed back. This time it is real. The Countess sat rigidly in a velvet chair, Letizia beside her. The older woman's face had settled into a mask of aristocratic disdain, but her hands betrayed her, clenching and unclenching in her lap. Judge Alberti, her voice rang with practiced authority, I demand to know the specific charges against me. This theatrical display may impress provincials, but I am not without friends in Rome. Your friends in Rome are precisely why we moved so quickly. The judge settled into the governor's own chair, claiming the position of authority without hesitation. When Minister Crispi learned that certain senators were involved in protecting your operation, he decided immediate action was necessary. Operation. The Countess laughed coldly. I run a household, Judge. I attend charitable functions. I support the arts. What operation do you imagine? The systematic destruction of small business owners through fraudulent debt collection. The judge nodded toward Bianca. May I see the documents you recovered? Bianca handed over the bag with trembling hands. Judge Alberti spread the papers across the table, examining them with the careful attention of a scholar studying ancient manuscripts. Fascinating. He held up a letter. This appears to be a direct instruction from you, Countess, to Signor Rossi. It describes the process for manufacturing evidence against a textile merchant named Bernardi. I recall that case. The man hanged himself in his shop after losing everything. A forgery. The Countess did not flinch. Anyone could imitate my handwriting. Perhaps. The judge selected another document. But this ledger contains entries in 3 different hands. One is clearly Rossi's. One matches samples we obtained from your personal correspondence. And the third, he looked directly at Letizia, belongs to your niece. Letizia's carefully maintained composure cracked. I was following orders. She twisted toward her aunt. Tell them I only did what you commanded. Be silent, the Countess hissed. No! Letizia's voice rose to near hysteria. I will not hang for your crimes! She turned to Judge Alberti with desperate urgency. I can give you everything. Names, dates, methods. I kept records of my own, insurance against exactly this moment. You foolish girl. The Countess's mask finally shattered. After everything I gave you, after I raised you from nothing, you would betray me? You taught me betrayal, Aunt. Letizia's laugh bordered on madness. You taught me that survival matters more than loyalty. I learned my lessons well. The governor watched this exchange with the fascination of a man observing dangerous animals through protective glass. His political instincts had clearly concluded that distance from the Countess was essential to his continued career. "Judge Alberti," he interjected smoothly, "naturally my office will provide any assistance necessary to this investigation. I confess I had no knowledge of any wrongdoing. Your knowledge, or lack thereof, will be examined in due course." The judge's tone suggested he found the governor's sudden cooperation unconvincing. "For now, I require statements from all witnesses." Marco stepped forward. His face showed the exhaustion of years, the weight of a crusade finally reaching its conclusion. "I can provide context for the documents," he said quietly. "My father, Count Alessandro Sforza, died 10 years ago. The official verdict was suicide following financial ruin. I have evidence that his deaths were manufactured, his destruction orchestrated by his own wife." "Your aunt?" The judge's voice softened slightly. "Yes." Marco did not look at the Countess. "She killed my father as surely as if she had held the blade herself. She has continued killing ever since, destroying families to feed her greed." He finally turned to face her. "Why? We had everything. The name, the fortune, the position. What could possibly justify this?" The Countess met his gaze without flinching. In that moment, Bianca saw something terrible in her eyes. Not madness, but calculation. The cold assessment of a predator evaluating prey. "Your father was weak." Her voice held no remorse. "He had principles, morals, ridiculous notions about fairness and justice. He would have given everything away to his pathetic charities." She leaned forward. "I saved this family. Every lira I took, every business I destroyed, built our fortune higher. Your father would have left you nothing. I made you rich. You made me an orphan. I made you strong." The Countess smiled coldly. "Look at yourself, Marco. A prosecutor, respected, feared. You would have been nothing without the hardship I gave you." The room fell silent. Bianca felt the horror of the Countess's logic, the twisted rationalization that justified murder as education, theft as care. Judge Alberti cleared his throat. "Countess Sforza, you are hereby placed under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and suspicion of involvement in multiple deaths." He gestured to his officials. "Take her into custody." "You cannot do this." The Countess rose with terrible dignity. "I am a Sforza. My family built this city." "Your family's name will be remembered."
The judge's voice hardened, but not in the way you intended. Guards stepped forward. The Countess did not struggle as they bound her wrists, but her eyes found Bianca's across the room. "You think you have won, seamstress," her whisper carried like smoke. "But some victories taste like ashes. Ask my nephew how much joy his justice brings him." They led her away into the night. Letizia followed, still babbling promises of cooperation, her loyalty evaporating like morning frost. The governor excused himself to compose urgent letters to Rome, no doubt crafting explanations for his proximity to corruption. Bianca sat alone with her brother and Marco in the emptying hall. The candles guttered in their holders, casting long shadows across the marble floor. "It is over," Enzo said wonderingly. "It is actually over." But looking at Marco's face, Bianca was not certain anything was truly finished.
6 months had transformed Milan. Spring arrived early that year, filling the city with the scent of flowering linden trees and the sound of birds returning from southern migrations. The newspapers had moved on from the Sforza scandal, finding fresh outrages to fuel their daily editions. But the effects of those autumn revelations continued rippling through society like stones thrown into still water. Bianca stood before the mirror in her new workshop, adjusting the collar of a dress she had designed herself. The space occupied the ground floor of a modest building on Via Manzoni, purchased with money recovered from the Countess's frozen assets. Judge Alberti had ensured that victims received compensation before the state claimed its share. The workshop bore her name above the door, Morelli Sisters, dressmakers. A small lie, since she remained the only sister, but the plural suggested prosperity and tradition. Her clients came from the emerging middle class, women who wanted elegance without aristocratic pretension. Enzo appeared in the doorway, his leather apron stained with the honest work of his trade. The prison pallor had faded from his face, replaced by the healthy color of a man rebuilding his life.
The delivery from the tannery arrived. He smiled, and Bianca saw traces of their father in the expression. Good quality this time. I think old Bernardi's son is finally learning the business. His father would be proud. The name hung between them, a reminder of all the families destroyed by the Countess's greed. Young Bernardi had inherited nothing but debts when his father hanged himself in despair. Now, with the fraudulent claims dismissed and compensation paid, he was slowly restoring the family business. You have a visitor.
Enzo's smile turned knowing. He has been waiting in the garden for 20 minutes, too nervous to come inside. Bianca's heart quickened despite herself. She smoothed her dress one final time and walked through the workshop to the small courtyard behind. Flowers bloomed in terracotta pots along the walls, a luxury she had permitted herself as the business grew stable. Marco sat on a stone bench beneath an old fig tree. He wore simple clothes, no longer the formal robes of a prosecutor. His resignation had shocked Milan's legal community, though Bianca understood the reasons better than most. "You came," she said softly. "I almost did not." He rose, his movements uncertain. "The trial ended yesterday. I thought you should hear the verdict from me rather than the newspapers." She settled onto the bench, leaving space for him to join her. The spring sunshine warmed her face while she waited for him to find his words. "My aunt received life imprisonment." His voice was flat, controlled. Letizia received 15 years, reduced for cooperation. Rossi will hang next month for his direct involvement in 3 deaths. And the others? Various sentences. Some fled the country before they could be arrested. The governor retained his position by testifying against everyone he had previously protected. Marco's disgust was evident. Politics consumes justice like fire consumes paper. But the verdicts are real. The victims are acknowledged. Their families can finally mourn properly. Is that enough? He turned to face her, and she saw the exhaustion carved into his features. "I destroyed my family name. The Sforza fortune is scattered, the palazzo sold to pay restitution. Everything my ancestors built across centuries, gone in 6 months." Bianca reached for his hand. He flinched at first, then allowed the contact. "Your ancestors did not build that fortune," she said quietly. "Your aunt built it on stolen lives. What you destroyed was a monument to cruelty.
What you built in its place is something real.
I built nothing. I tore down. There is a difference.
Then build now. She squeezed his hand. The tearing down is finished. What comes next is your choice.
Marco looked at their joined hands as if seeing them for the first time. The gray eyes that had once seemed so cold now held something vulnerable, something human. "I received an offer from Rome," he said slowly. "The ministry wants prosecutors who cannot be purchased."
Judge Alberti recommended me. That is wonderful.
It would mean leaving Milan, leaving everything I have known. He paused. Leaving you. The words hung in the spring air like seeds waiting to find soil. Bianca felt her heart constricting with emotions she had forbidden herself to examine during the desperate months of investigation and trial. "I have a business here," she said carefully. "My brother needs me. Our clients depend on the workshop." "I know." "Rome is very far." "I know." They sat in silence while a bird sang somewhere in the fig tree above them. Bianca thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. The desperate seamstress seeking employment in a monster's house. The dangerous alliance with a man she did not trust. The midnight terrors and narrow escapes that had seemed endless while she lived through them. "My mother once told me something," she said finally. "She said that love is not a destination, but a direction. You do not arrive at it and stop.
You keep traveling toward it, day after day, choice after choice. Marco turned toward her fully, his expression questioning.
What does that mean for us? It means I cannot follow you to Rome. Not now, perhaps not ever. My life is here, in this workshop, in this city that nearly destroyed my family.
She met his gaze steadily.
But it also means that distance is not the same as ending.
You would wait?
I would write. I would visit when business allows. I would build something here while you build something there.
She smiled despite the tears gathering in her eyes.
And perhaps someday, our buildings will be close enough to share a wall.
Marco lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss against her fingers with a tenderness that seemed impossible from the cold prosecutor she had first met. I do not deserve such patience.
Probably not. But I am a seamstress. We are accustomed to working with difficult materials.
He laughed, the sound startling in its rarity.
She realized she had never heard him truly laugh before. "When do you leave?" she asked.
"Next week. The ministry wants me to begin immediately. Something about corruption in the southern courts that requires attention."
"Then we have 1 week."
1 week, he agreed, and then letters and visits and patience.
And time.
They sat together as the afternoon lengthened, talking about small things, inconsequential things, the details of his journey south, the new fabrics she had ordered from France, the weather, the food, the 1,000 ordinary subjects that fill the spaces between significant moments. When evening came, Marco rose to leave. At the garden gate he paused. "My father kept a journal," he said quietly. "I found it among his papers after the trial. He wrote about my mother, about their courtship. He said he knew from the first moment that she was dangerous to his peace of mind." "Was she?" "Utterly." He met her eyes.
But he also said that peace without love is merely emptiness wearing a pleasant mask. He kissed her then, gently, briefly, a promise rather than a conclusion. After he left, Bianca returned to her workshop. Orders awaited her attention. Fabrics needed cutting, accounts required balancing. The ordinary work of building a life from the ruins of catastrophe. She picked up her needle and began to sew. Outside, the city of Milan continued its eternal rhythms. Merchants hawked their wares, children played in the streets, carriages rattled over cobblestones polished by centuries of passage. In the courts, justice ground forward with imperfect machinery. In the prisons, the guilty contemplated their choices. In countless workshops and homes, ordinary people pursued ordinary dreams. And in a small courtyard on Via Manzoni, flowers bloomed in terracotta pots, watered by a seamstress who had learned that even the darkest threads can be woven into something beautiful.